OST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hotter Show.
What is up, everybody? We're rolling audio here today in episode 340 of The Hotter Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. I've got a really fun episode for you today, as I try to do every single week right here on The Hotter Show. I'm sitting down for yet another edition of The Albums That Made Me, but this time I'm bringing in a little backup for this one, because today we are diving in to Seether's Karma and Effect, which is a really important record for me and my guest, Mr. Garrett Coles, who is, of course, if you're a longtime listener to the show, he's one of my oldest and dearest friends. We've been friends for like 27 years or some bullshit like that. So, needless to say, this record is actually a very important record for us collectively and our friendship. So I cannot wait to dive into this edition of The Albums That Made Me with Garrett. But before we jump in, I want to thank everybody for their support on last week's episode of the show, in which I had a conversation with Danny Franchise, the reigning and defending Cale Murphy Memorial Champion for Chinlock Wrestling. Huge shout out to Danny and everybody who supported that episode. I don't talk wrestling related topics as much on the show as I did way back in the day, but it's something that's kind of sort of been poking its head out a little more here and there, and I think you'll maybe see me have on some guests to talk wrestling a little more often, because I really do love wrestling, and it's something that I think is really interesting to dissect and talk about in a positive way, just like these editions here on The Hotter Show of The Albums That Made Me, which I truly love doing, and this one was so much fun doing it with a guest for the very first time. I hope that you enjoy it. This is The Albums That Made Me, Seether's Karma and Effect. Let's get into it. Seether are one of the most important bands in my life, and they have been since I first heard them in 2004. Specifically, the Karma and Effect record, along with that whole era of the band, is really important to me. And today, we're doing a dive into that record here on The Albums That Made Me here on The Hotter Show. But I couldn't do this one alone, because this record is not only very important to me, but it's a really special record in the grand scheme of things for my friendship with my guest here today. We haven't talked to in a while, so it's fun to sit down with him here. I think episode 155 was the last time. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Garrett Coles, back on The Hotter Show. What's up, brother?
It has been a hot minute. I thought you were going to be like, yeah, we haven't heard from you in a while. I was like, buddy, I saw you last week. And then
I mean, that's the thing, right? I think it's funny because
we live in the same city, down the road.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, but hey, remember that thing I do creatively that I'm really passionate about? Yeah. Haven't seen that in
a fucking minute.
But I've been a supporter. My whole family's been a supporter. We've been listening, subscribing, downloading.
I appreciate that, and shout outs to the folks.
Yeah, my dad puts yours on all the time. Every morning I'll come home. Sometimes I'll be like in his office because he works from home now. He's like, oh, I was listening to the new Hotter Show episode, and I'm like, Dad, I haven't been on it in a while. And he's like, I know. I'm like, thanks.
Yeah, I know. He said better people on.
Jim Cole is a bigger TJ fan than me.
Shout out to Jim. What's up, Jim? Gwen, how's it going? Good. Hope you guys are doing well. But this is cool, man, because I've been doing these Albums That Made Me segments here on the show. I've done a couple of them now, and I'm going down my list of albums, and obviously Seether's Karma and Effect has to be on my list. And I was like, I'd love to bring someone in to do this with, just an album that maybe thinks it's so fun. And thinking about it, for me, albums that are really important, I would say, for our friendship. I mean, I think Karma and Effect's got to be...
So Karma and Effect is really unique timing for us wise. Yes. So we're both 91 babies. 2004, 2005. So obviously when they started dropping the singles, it would have been 2004.
Yeah, it was like late 2000.
Yeah, but then the album itself didn't, because it was one of the very first times that I, as a huge music nerd, went out and bought an album like on release, because it's ingrained in my head as the first CD album that I've ever actually like purchased for me by myself, is this Seether Karma and Effect album. Because I remember putting it in the car with my mom on the way to drum lessons, and how that first track hits, the very first opening of it, which we'll get to later. But it was like, this is the kind of music you listen to as like I think, so 91, 2004, 2000. So we're like 14, 15.
14, 15, somewhere in that ballpark.
That epitome of like teenage angst years.
Angsty, yeah.
Because we were both already into Seether from the Disclaimer era, because it was on some of their tracks were on certain video games that we played.
And we'll get to that for sure.
And then there's obviously the big one that we'll talk about later with Amy Lee. That was all 2002 and 2003. So we already kind of were both aware and like grunge alt rock kind of fans of the genre. So we already knew about Seether getting into it, at least for me anyway. I'm not sure about your specific one, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is just talk about kind of our introductions to Seether and that. Like, for me, my timeline, I'm remembering the timeline a little different. And this is why I'm glad I have you here, because I was under the impression the first time I heard Seether was I had heard Fine Again on the radio, and obviously I had heard Broken on the radio.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But for me, what really got me into Seether to the point why I went out and bought Disclaimer 2 was Fine Again's appearance on 1080 Avalanche.
Literally what I was gonna. I remember playing that game because it was one of the first video games that you could play that while you were actively playing, you didn't have to pause the game to change the track that you were listening to. You could cycle through the soundtrack that was playing in the background while you're snowboarding. Well, I think it was like select or whatever, but we'd always like skip a bunch of the crap and go right to Fine Again by Seether. And that was like one of the main ones that we would always be jamming out to.
Fine Again. There was two Finger 11 tracks were on there.
Good Times and Other Light.
All right, we'll jump in 3, 2, 1. And I had kind of forgotten about 1080 Avalanche until I started kind of doing research for this. Well, I was like, well, where did I first hear Seether? And it was definitely on 180 Avalanche. Was there any other video games that you remember Seether being on? Like, I couldn't think of any other ones.
Off the top of my head, I know for a fact there was a few.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, like I'm missing a couple. I want to say Day Reckoning had like the Breaking Benjamin tracks, which is the same era of like alt rock and stuff like that.
Yeah, that 2000s
like Firefly or whatever.
Firefly and
Polyamorous
or Polyanus or whatever.
The Saturate album, so good.
Yes, which is a fantastic album.
So good. If I ever do one of these things, that would definitely be one of them. But no, I think specifically the 1080 Avalanche, because we kind of got on a kick of like having to unlock everything. So we as gamers, as young teens, we're clearly not going out and doing a whole lot. You and me would just lock up and we would just, okay, how do we unlock this one guy? Okay, we're going to spend the next 8 hours listening to Seether's Fine Again on repeat with maybe 3 other songs because they're the only ones we liked on the soundtrack. And then the taste just kind of grew from there.
Well, and it was, like you had mentioned earlier, it was interesting timing because, we had heard, then it was like you recognized Broken from the radio.
Oh, and everyone was already into Evanescence because of like the whole Wake Me Up. What's that? Bring Me to Life.
I was going to say that whole Wake Me Up song.
Yeah.
Wake me up before you
go.
I love it.
But yeah, Evanescence and Amy Lee and their whole relationship brought out Broken, which is still one of the best tracks of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But that came out just after the Disclaimer. I'm going to say 2003 ? But yeah, so they already had some popularity, but Karma Effect was definitely their big hitting album by far.
And the fact that it was timing for us, like it literally came out like, because I want to say that Remedy had come out like near the end of the year in 2004.
I think it was attached to a movie. Something like there's something that was.
So the Punisher soundtrack and the Daredevil soundtrack had 2 songs on it, but neither of them were for Karma. Karma Effect didn't have any. No, sorry. I think Burrito was on. I think Burrito was on the Punisher.
Yeah.
Or Daredevil. One of those two.
But the album itself didn't have a whole lot of like pre-promotion. They were still riding the highs off of the Disclaimer album with Fine Again, and then the popularity of Broken, which was skyrocketing at the time.
Well, Broken's really what, and they've said this before a lot, where like Broken's kind of what, not saved their career, but it definitely revitalized their career with their popularity, right? Like I think it's pretty apparent that that's what did it.
there was the whole era of, okay, which band members are staying, which band members are going, because I think it's after Carmen Effect that they end up changing. I think it's bassist. I think Pat left or something.
So Pat was so they've always had the same bassist.
Okay.
Dale Stewart's always been in.
Oh yeah, Dale's bass.
Dale. And then they've had John for a while, and then Pat left after Carmen Effect. And then they've had a multitude of
but I think that was just them trying to find their unique sound and kind of like adjusting. Yeah. And Carmen Effect was kind of where they locked and loaded. Okay, this is the kind of rock band we want to be, and they put literally everything on the table. And it's, at least in my mind, one of the best aggressive grunge rock albums of the early 2002. Well, not 2004.
For sure. Diving into the album itself here with some background, just while we're on that conversation, it's funny because during interviews, Dale and Sean, who are really the two main members of Seether, you know, obviously Sean's the vocalist, Dale's the bass player, and rounding out the lineup for this, we have John Humphrey on the drums, and then Pat Callahan
does not get enough credit, by the way.
John is an amazing fucking drummer. He's like absolutely amazing,
super talented.
And at the time, Seether has talked a lot about, you know, kind of how they've only really been the true constant members of Seether since their inception. But then with Carmen Effect, they really considered it almost like their true debut record as a band, because the first, you know, Disclaimer and then Disclaimer 2, and even before that, the Sarin Gas record, it almost felt like they weren't really a real band because it was just the two of them working with session guys.
Yeah.
It's been just a multitude of players coming in to Seether. But diving into the actual record itself, so Carmen Effect was released on 2004, May of 2005 by Wind Up Records, and was produced by the legendary Bob Marlette, who has done countless stuff. He's a name that if you're familiar with this era of rock music and kind of alternative metal and stuff like that, you definitely know the name Bob Marlette. And it did spawn 3 singles, which was Remedy, Truth, and The Gift. Remedy reached #1 on the US mainstream rock charts, and it was Seether's first #1 hit, which I found very weird. As we already mentioned, you know, this was actually the last record to feature Pat Callahan on guitar. He did play on the Disclaimer 2, but really, Carmen Effect was the first record that he really fully played on, had a big hand in on this record. And it's so interesting because this record is, guitar wise,
I am actually wrong.
You're wrong. Okay, so
I am so wrong.
I didn't want to say
no. So you know why? Is because Broken never broke #20.
Really?
It peaked at #20 on the US Billboard.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Like, I figured that fucking song's still on the radio.
Yeah, and
same with
like both of us are like, there's no way. And in my head, I was like, there's got to be a reason why that wasn't #1. So I was trying to, like, off the top of my head, I was like, maybe it's because it's considered like 2 different artists. But
that was some good bullshit, man.
Hey,
that was some good bullshit.
Something in my brain was telling me that shit deserves to be #1. Okay, like there should be a reason why that isn't a Seether #1 hit.
And I think it just, I'm just laughing because it sounded like such good stuff.
But it makes sense to me.
Right. Yeah, well, that's all that. Listen, if it makes sense to you, that's all that matters. Oh, that's fantastic. A couple fun kind of random things about this record. So first and foremost, the album was actually originally supposed to be called Catering to Cowards. And it was deemed too offensive by someone at the record label or off-putting. Specifically, apparently one person at the label was really offended by it and were like, we're not putting this record out. And Sean explained actually in the interview that is attached to the One Cold Night DVD, which we will definitely talk about at some point before we sign off here today. He said that, and I quote, "We were willing to compromise since Carmen Effect was our close second choice for a name, and that they didn't want to piss anyone off." And he feels that Carmen Effect and Catering to Cowards is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't really understand his logic, but I'm not going to argue with Sean because he's
to me, Carmen Effect kind of almost stands out better.
I think so too. Catering to Cowards is an interesting name, but like it's very like kind of punk grunge-y, whereas Carmen Effect's like that sounds like a modern rock record. Catering to Cowards is a weird name, but he said, you know, obviously needing to compromise on this, they knew it was a big deal with their label. Okay, we got to play ball on this. He did, however, stress that they would not be compromising again in the future. And they never have since.
But, I mean, to that effect, though.
Haha. Oh, fuck off.
That was terrible. But it actually did pay out for them because Karma Effect is one of their few first albums that actually went certified platinum in the States.
Yes, it did.
And I think it's gold in Canada.
It is gold in Canada. One random thing that I thought was super interesting that I didn't know until today about this record, listening again to that One Cold Night interview, there's absolutely no swearing on Karma Effect. And it's one of those things where like you don't really catch it until it's brought up to you where like there's no swearing on it. And I thought for sure there was. I went and looked at the track listing. There isn't a single swear word on it. And this was actually a conscious choice by Sean Morgan because they asked, oh, well, was it the record label that wanted this? And he said, no. He said, and I quote loosely, I had a talk with Coy from Slipknot about it. He's someone who the media always said just drops F-bombs. And I wanted to challenge myself and show that I actually have a vocabulary. So super random, but...
Well, that would make sense too, because the album cover itself, if it was covering expletives, it would have the explicit or whatever, like that old warning that they used to put on the front of CDs being like, parental advisory. They say a bad word.
They say fuck 2 more times, and that's going to be 46 fucks in this fucked up rhyme.
It's like when I play my favorite game, like when you're listening to a random song, it's like, okay, if you could insert the word fuck into this song anywhere, just you get one. Where would it be?
It's like, and that reminded me of Josie Scott from Saliva with Bloodstained Love Stories, where he was saying how like his grandmother challenged him to not swear on it because the record before it was like just every covered. Other song was an F-bomb. And I mean, they had a song, Fuck All Y'all. Like that was, and like, I remember him saying like, yeah, my grandmother was like, oh, Josie, I don't want you to cuss on the next record. So he didn't.
But I think that speaks to Karma Effect's power because there's some pretty dark, like there's some emotion behind a lot of these tracks. I mean, it's alt rock, grungy, like it's not like a we went to pick flowers today kind of album. It's like I
Coming
just broke
soon.
up with my girlfriend. I don't really like being picked on, like, or like, you know, you're just in a dark place mentally. And the fact that they don't have to use a single curse word in the entirety of the album, you wouldn't know it. Like just by listening, like you would think they'd be covered in it. So it's more powerful that they can get that same kind of thematic emotional feel across without having to cover every track with 1,000 fuck yous.
This and fuck that. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, totally. And it's so interesting because
shows off his talent as a writer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's something for me. Like Sean's never been someone who really discusses lyrical content. As he's gotten older, he does a little bit more. And there's something interesting. Again, I learned today that about one of the songs that at the time
looks you doing
he
your
never
homework.
Discussed. Yeah, well, you know, I try to be somewhat prepared. Usually, in the past, when I've done these, it's just been me bullshitting, and I'm like, I'm going to try and put a little more work into it. But it has not come to the time here on the albums that made me here on the Hotter Show, featuring Garrett, covering Karma Effect by Seether, that we are going to dive into the tracks, and we're just basically, I'm going to say the track. We're going to talk some shit about it in a good way, not talk shit in a bad way. And then we'll move on. All right. If you have something to add, cool. If not, then fucking we'll move on.
All right.
I'm
Before looking
sure.
at your notes, look me dead in the eye. Look me dead in the eye.
Okay.
How many tracks are there on this album?
13.
14.
So you're counting the secret song, right? So technically, it's 13 because Plastic Man and the secret song are on the same track.
Well, depends which release, like CD release, but yeah. Pretty sure, like if you looked at the album, if you look at the album on streaming now, they're separated it, didn't they?
Nope. Kumsaktik May is not on
the Arkansas or African.
Kumsaktik May is not actually on the Spotify release.
Oh,
but they have the silence at the end of Plastic Man.
Yeah, like
which is weird.
The 5 minute, which we'll talk about.
Yes.
So we got 13/14 songs to go through.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 13. And then, I'll give you the 14
all right.
with Come Drink With Me.
That's off the top of my head, too.
That was again, that's some good shit. So first and foremost, we have which I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say this, one of, it's definitely of the era of that kind of mid to early 2000s post-grunge era, which obviously Seether are a huge part of, one of the best album openers from that era with Because of Me.
So throw back to what we were talking about in the intro.
Yes.
Starting that CD, you're throwing it in, you're in like the first like 30 seconds of the song, and you just get hit with some of like the deepest vocals of like
Just that, that riff, like, oh.
You know what you're getting into from there on out. Like,
Bro, I vividly remember, because I went and got the CD, and my mother was usually cool with letting me listen to my music in the car. Because at that point, it was pretty much just Nickelback, right? That's really all I listened to.
Yeah. Someday.
But don't even get me started. Don't even get me started. Hey, what's my favorite guitar solo?
I'm not answering that because I'm going to get it wrong.
Someday by Nickelback. It's not actually my favorite guitar solo, but it's a close second.
It's up there.
It's a close second.
But you're absolutely right, though. It's the epitome of being like, my mom was the exact same way of like, this is where they're at.
Jeez, like, okay. And I remember, so I had to, because she didn't want to play the album in the car because the cover freaked her out.
Yeah.
And she was like, is this like death metal? And I was like, no. Like, I was like, oh, you know that Broken song? She's like, yeah. I'm like, that's them. She's like, oh, okay. So, but either way, she was like, I don't know about this. And thank God, because if she had heard that right away, she probably would be like, what the hell is happening to my child? But I remember vividly going home, getting my Walkman, putting on my headphones, and pressing play. Well, first off, I had to unskip it because my Walkman was a piece of shit. And it took effort for me, because that's what I used to do. I would literally come home from school, do my homework, sit on the couch, put on headphones, and that's all I would do. I wouldn't do, because I wasn't allowed to play video games during the week.
Right.
So all I would do was listen to music. That's why I got such a profound love for albums like Silver Side Up, Long Road in the State by Nickelback, because I spent
It's literally all you had going on.
hours just listening to music. That's all I did. I couldn't watch TV.
And that's on your mom too, as a piano teacher. Like,
Yes.
music was a big part of her life, so she made it a big part of your life.
Absolutely. And I remember so vividly that fucking just the like, just it's so vivid, that feeling. And after only really being familiar with Fine Again and the radio tunes from Seether,
it's a complete left hook.
yeah.
And to the same extent, I remember like if I was having like a really moody day and I would come home, and we have one of those old school like boom boxes. Me and my sister, she had one. They were like matching colors. And it's probably like, if I put my two fists together, not very much bigger than this. And I would come home and like, that's the album that you would hear. Like, it's like the epitome of like parents thinking about like their teenage son or whatever. And like they come home and they slam the door and then the loud music kicks on. That's exactly, that's how you know Garrett's had a bad day.
But with Because of Me too, you know, being such a just heavy as fuck, I would say very much the alternative metal style of Seether. Like, I think Because of Me is the epitome of that. Killer riff, not to mention that bridge breakdown section.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That very slight out of tune guitar part is so, it adds such a dark vibe to that. Because if it was
it's
like
almost
totally
got like the
clean
beginning of
tuned,
like a metal breakdown. Like a lot of modern metal has like, or like they call it gent metal, have like the breakdowns, like it's really slow. It's like da da, and like it kind of like it's supposed to build up to like a big chorus break. And for Because of Me, it's got that one section where it just kind of goes and it goes like right back in. They do like the same kind of almost like just they pace themselves.
They bring it down to then bring it back up.
Yeah.
And just slam you in the face, and he's screaming at you, and there's a lead
it's
part.
4 minutes of just pure emotion.
Pure, raw, unadulterated, just anger and frustration. Pure, just 4 minutes of
which, to be real, is a large majority of this album is just pure. But you know what? Like, I ain't mad about it at the slightest.
No, for sure. Definitely Because of Me is a fantastic opener here on Karma and Effect. Of course, then the next tune we have, I mean,
It's Remedy.
Everyone knows
Everyone knows
Remedy, man. It's the big single. It's a song that you still hear all the time. Even people who don't know Seether that well know Remedy. And I mean, that riff.
I think that's the one that
legendary.
they've put on some other like soundtracks.
Yes,
as well.
and also it was WWE SummerSlam's theme in 2005.
Right.
Which that's how a lot of people discovered it. But it was in tons of different video games, and I mean,
it was the big one for the album for sure.
Yeah, that's one that I think everybody knows. It also had a really cool music video. Remember music videos? Remember when they were a fucking thing?
It's actually the one Seether music video that I'm not a huge fan of. I have an issue with clowns. It's kind of
right.
It's
Well,
got,
he's a car.
it's like a carnival theme. It's like part of me is like, this is great because the track is just absolutely killer, and at the same time, it's just like I'm already at unease because of just like the.
I'm never gonna watch this again.
Yeah.
See, whereas to me, like that was nightmare fuel for sure. But I also really dug the fact that, especially now, as someone who appreciates horror and stuff like that a lot more than I used to, I went back and watched the video today and I'm like, dude, like it's such a cool, dark video. And I mean, what can we say about Remedy that hasn't already been said? It's such a legendary song. It's one of my favorite Seether songs to play. And I pick up a guitar.
The skin is dry.
Yeah, like come on.
Back to the Remedy.
Back to the Remedy.
It's so good.
So freaking good.
And like I believe it's I think it's on the One Cold Night album. They've done a bunch of their acoustic versions of their song. It's just as good, played softer, and it's the emotion behind the words still hits just as well as home. So like they don't need that gritty power chords and they don't need that. The riff is still the same on an
that
acoustic as it
slaps
is
just as
on an
fucking
electric.
hard. Yeah, slaps just as hard on acoustic as it does on electric for sure. And if for some reason you don't know Remedy and you're listening to this, I don't know why you'd listen to this if you don't know Remedy, but go listen to fucking Remedy because it is amazing. Absolutely awesome track. Garrett, let me ask you a question. Here. If I gave you the truth, would it keep you alive?
Depends. Am I in a cage match against Santa Claus with the Easter Bunny?
Yeah.
Well, then probably.
Probably. All right.
Both of those things have things to do with this goddamn track because the truth is one of those ones that like the first time I listened to, I wasn't huge on. And like as far as the Remedy music video pushed me away, the Truth music video with the wrestling match between Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and a bunch of other shit, like it also pulled me back in. And because YouTube was so like the bare bones in the future,
it was that was really when YouTube started like really taking off too. It was like 2005,
and like so you would find, or even just be on TV, and like that was one of the few like music videos that we would have looping, like on the MSN days, and it would be like the video for Truth or Gift, which is later. But I just remember we're not watching Remedy because I can listen to the track all day long, but the Truth music video,
stay away from that goddamn video.
But it's you've been sitting there listening to about 8 minutes of just hard rock, and the Truth is one of the first times that it kind of slow the brakes a little bit. Mm-hmm. And if I gave you
very mid-range from the band, kind of mixing their radio rock style with still some heaviness with the chorus and the bridge. Mm-hmm. It's like it's a really good break leading into the rest of the album. And one thing I really love about this track is, and obviously you guys are going to hear me say this a lot because I am a guitar player, the guitar layering for this song, but specifically the verses with the acoustic and that picking part is just, and it's something I didn't really realize I loved so much until I listened to it more recently. And also that bridge section, the solo, like, come on, just a fantastic freaking song, and guitar wise, is definitely, I think, one of the strongest ones.
It's definitely one that's more grown on to me in the later years of my life than it was when I was younger. It was like, okay, this is great, but I would end up repeating the 3 or 4 big tracks that I really liked over and over. And sometimes I would do all the way through, And now as an adult, that's more how I prefer to listen to an album, is from start to finish. Like I used to like hit my sister's hand when I was 16 driving if she would skip a song on my CD player. And like nowadays it's like The Truth has just become one of my more favorite Seether tracks to just like put on. And like sometimes I'll use that to cue up like my listen of like the whole discography. Like it's one of the standout. Oh, okay, this is the kind of mental headspace I'm in right now.
It's a good intro. Like for people who aren't familiar with Seether, too, Truth is a really, really great song to show them. And also Truth was featured on some WWE stuff as well.
Which explains a lot.
Yes. I think it was there was an angle between Test and Scott Steiner. I want to say I think Truth. I know that Suffocate by Cold was involved in that angle, and I want to say Truth was too, but don't quote me on that,
another
folks.
great alt-rock band.
Oh fuck yeah! Well, that was the first one I did for the albums that made me was Cold's Year of the Spider, which was interesting to dive into head first. That was fun. But yeah, no, Truth, definitely a badass track. Now, the next one that we have here, we've already kind of mentioned a couple of times, and this is one of the most interesting songs on the record. And on a personal note, it's one of my favorites. I would probably say a very, very close second. And
on the whole album?
Yeah, I would say the whole album. And that's The Gift. Specifically for me, as much as like I love the lyrics, I love Sean's vocals, but for me, instrumentation wise, I think it's one of the strongest songs on the record because you have those beautiful, beautiful lead parts from Pat Callahan where he has like the high pass filter on it or the low pass filter on his guitar for the leads. It's dirty and bluesy, but it's still really tasteful and still very rock and Seether. Dale is playing some super tasteful but really melodic and powerful bass parts. And then, I mean, I don't need to tell you, fucking John Humphrey coming with the coming into that chorus. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I think amazing.
John's best ability is that he's able to play these tracks, and when he wants to stand out and he wants to, like, you know, kind of steal the spotlight for a couple of minutes, he can. But it's almost like you forget that he's there. And that's a lot of what I enjoy about him as a drummer is that, like, you know he's there and you don't even have to, like, think about it. And his drumming is just so perfectly in the pocket.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get hit with something like that and you're like, oh yeah, this drummer's kind of a badass.
The ability that he has, and he shows it a lot on this record, but specifically that fill he has leading from the pre-chorus into the chorus of The Gift, I think that's one of my favorite things he's ever done. Just that, but like again, I don't need to tell you what the fucking part is, but as a drummer, I'm curious. Is it you like? I mean, you've already said, you know, you're a big fan of him because like he's playing in the park. It's almost like you don't really know he's there until he wants you to know he's there.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're really a big fan of? Like when drummers
100%.
can just they can let loose on a fill and make it really tasteful, but it's still they don't overshadow anything else.
I think, and musically, this is how I've kind of just. There are so many talented people when it comes to putting out any sort of music. Like you get, this is a weird attachment that I'm going to do, but you can talk about Adele and immediately you recognize by, okay, yeah, she's at 20 something. She had one of the best vocal performances in the world.
Oh, hell yeah.
And you know, no matter what, you throw a mic in that woman's hands and she's going to freaking shine. But you also don't talk about the fact that there's the person on the piano or the guitarist or anything. There's a lot more that gets done behind everything to make a single track work. And I find, especially in the early 2000s, when hard rock was the way it was, frontman was the only real role that got the fame in the early days. A lot of it was, okay, Chad Kroeger. Oh, you mean his band, Nickelback?
Oh, Nickelback! Whatever. I love that guy.
Yeah, but everyone knew who Chad was, and then it was like, okay, yeah, Nickelback is his thing, or people know who Sean is because Seether is his thing, or Amy Lee from Evanescence. You know what I mean? Like, people the project started getting identified more because of individual people, not realizing that it takes an army to make something so damn fucking good. And when it comes to Seether, specifically John, knowing where you have to be to do your part to make the track come out perfectly, and there's plenty of musicians that do this, being a pocket drummer is amazing, because it takes a lot of ego control to be like, I don't have to be the loudest one in the room right now, which I know I get shit on for that all the time when I play, because it's like, okay, you're really loud, but you also realize that we're playing in a tiny basement sometimes, and sound can only go so far. But on a recorded project that comes out after it's been mastered and leveled and produced, and I'm sure producers all over can tell me otherwise, but it takes everyone's individual performance to make that track the way it is. Yeah. And him being able to throttle that back a little bit, make sure that he's not overshadowing anything, it makes Sean and Dale's performances just that much more grabbing. It's like you get sucked in once. It's almost like it's building the environment around you when you're listening to it.
Right. It's super important for almost like world building of this song to have. And again,
you can't have one guy playing a lullaby while the other guy's giving you blast beats.
Right. He's really good. And I mean, he shows that off. But again, for me specifically in this song, he really takes a step back. It just with the rhythm section and lets Dale, who normally doesn't go super crazy with his parts. He usually pulls himself back, but for the gift, there's a lot of movement going on, and there's a little more going on than I originally thought until I really listened to the track. And I can't say enough wonderful things. I think for me, if someone says what is like this era of Seether's like peak performance as far as them as a unit, I think the gift's got to be close to the top, man.
I would have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah, even if it's not the best song on the record, but it's definitely
up there.
It's definitely
we'll do a top three later. We'll do a top three.
Okay, because I'll be curious to hear your top three. An interesting note about this song that I didn't know until today. So back in the day, if Sean, well, first I have to tell the story. So basically, Sean wrote The Gift thinking he was going to gift the song to another band. See what I did there? Ha ha ha. He had no intentions of The Gift being a Seether song. He thought like, nah, this isn't for Seether. And I guess he showed it to the guys kind of on a, hey guys, I wrote this song for a session thing. And they were like, well, what the fuck? This is a great song. And they explored it. Regarding the lyrical content, Sean always used to say, I have no idea what it's about. Please don't ask. That's all he used to say about it. Even in the One Cold Night thing, where you can tell Pierre, who's an amazing interviewer, was going in to ask him, and Sean kind of said with a smirk, like, I don't know what it's about, so please don't ask me. Because like he'd been asked so many times, and he was like, I don't know what it's about. It's like, I don't know where this song came from. Yeah. Fast forward to 2013, and he talks, there was an interview that, I don't know if he's talked about it elsewhere, but there's an interview he did actually at Guitar Center, where they did Guitar Center sessions, which is an amazing thing. You guys go watch on YouTube. He talks about each album cycle. There's one song where he says like, it literally like saved my life from what I was dealing with in my life on that album cycle. And he talks about, Rise Above This from Fighting Beauty is one, and blah, blah, blah. There's a couple other songs. But then he says The Gift from Karma and Effect. And I was surprised when he said that. And then he talks about how it was actually about his daughter, who was born right around this time, and his feelings about being a father and fatherhood, and how he felt about it, and kind of coming to terms with that. And knowing that information and re-listening to the song, I'm like, holy fuck, like that. It just makes it so much deeper.
Perspective changes everything.
It does. And he's not someone who normally likes to talk about his lyrics, but in that situation, I'm glad he did, because then also looking at the video, which you mentioned earlier, I mean, that is a fucking beautiful, beautiful video. I remember watching that all the time back when MTV played music videos. You remember that shit?
Oh yeah.
Back in the day.
You remember when MTV was about music?
Yeah.
Not reality TV.
Fucking MTV. But yeah, no, I mean, The Gift, it's a gift. What else can I say?
It is the gift of the album.
Definitely the gift of the album. And it's also, one of the singles too. It's a song a lot of people know from Seether.
But on that regard of like, when you think about how like the lyrics make the song so much better, and then understanding the context years later makes that so much better. This next one, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. Like, I have tried for the longest time to figure out why burrito and the lyrics for burrito go together. And it's definitely right where it belongs on the album, like right in the middle. Like, it's a good rock song.
Heavy song.
Heavy.
Good riff.
Why the fuck is it called burrito?
So we're going to get into that. So again, for me, burrito, I'm a riff guy. Heavy riffs happening. Killer lead work and overdubs from Sean and Pat. I'm a really big fan of guitar parts that sit just behind the main riff, and you don't really notice they're there too much. I notice it, but not even the rhythms. So this is a really good example. So with burrito, it's got that dun 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 dun, but then behind that, Pat's going down 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 down. You don't, and it's something where it's like you don't really notice it's there until it's not there, and you go, well, what the fuck? Where's the riff? Because the main riff Sean's just going dun 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 dun, and it almost sounds like it's one riff, but
it's three different ones kind of doing the same thing. That's how scales work. Like it's so amazing that you can play the same thing on three different locations on the guitar, and it's technically the same note structure, but they sound completely different,
played differently.
Yeah,
and then it's a whole other thing. But it's
also one of the first times too. When speaking of that whole rhythm, it's the first time that Sean really plays with the rhythm of speech and how he places the enunciation. It's the first time in almost the whole album where I had to actually go, okay, wait, hold on. I think he said this, so I'm sitting there with the book as a kid. Oh, so that's what the lyrics are supposed to be. That's definitely not what I heard. That whole, you keep taking away, and keep taking, break. That it's done 3 times, but I always thought it was the same every 3 times, but it's actually different. One time it's taking, one time it's faking, and then the last one's actually hating. And for years as a kid, you get hooked in, oh, I know the chorus. I can say the same 3 things 3 times in the song. I got this, except it's not. Because he enunciates just a little differently, and it's so easy to miss, but at the same time, it's you're already hooked. You're all, yeah, I'm in. I'm singing every freaking word.
Totally in. I love burrito.
What do you mean I'm saying the wrong song?
What do you mean I'm singing it wrong? I love it. So I have to ask, if you had to guess, why is the song called Burrito?
I'm shot in the dark. Absolute shot in the dark. That's what he had for lunch.
So on the One Cold Night interview, Pierre asked them, basically, he knew why because he had heard the story, but he asked them, so what's with this song Burrito? So, because fun fact, they played Burrito at One Cold Night, but it wasn't on the CD. So, because apparently they didn't want any swearing, even though there's no swearing in Burritos. Anyway.
Is it on the performance DVD?
Nope.
Interesting.
You can find it on YouTube.
Cool.
It's really cool. So Burrito was a song they wrote for the Punisher soundtrack, Daredevil soundtrack.
Right.
And it didn't have a name. They just called it Heavy Song 4 or whatever the fuck. And Sean couldn't think of a name that he was happy with. And one day they're on the bus and they're watching the Osbournes. And on this particular episode of the Osbournes.
Is that the one where Ozzy's like, who ate my burrito?
No, Ozzy, close. Ozzy spent the entire episode just asking people if they want, oh, Jack, you want spicy burrito? Let's go to spicy burrito. Sharon, let's get some spicy burritos. So they decided, we're going to tribute it to Ozzy and name the song Burrito. So that's why the song's called Burrito. You don't have to wonder anymore.
Well, it's good to know that it's named after Ozzy Osbourne because, realistically, that's still kind of legendary.
Yeah, right?
Literally, you put Ozzy's name on anything, and you're like, hey, yeah, that checks out.
But wouldn't it be kind of cool if it was he was eating a burrito one day and the record label was like, we need a name for this fucking song. And he was like, yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, Burrito, definitely a fun one. So the next song, it's kind of a hidden gem, but also it's interesting because to me, vocally, I think it's one of Sean's most diverse songs on the record, but depending on who you ask, it also is kind of one of the weaker songs on the record. I really enjoy it, but Given is...
It's a given.
It's
there.
Like,
it's just like it doesn't stand out in any way.
As much as the rest of the tracks.
It's
at all.
freaking good.
Oh, absolutely.
Which, if they haven't figured out by now, we're going to say almost about this entire freaking album is that every
That's
track,
what I do.
It's a good listen. Like if you're in the mood for a hard rock album, you can't go wrong with a single one of these tracks. But if you're trying to compare it to the rest of them, Given doesn't really stand out in one way or the other. But it's still like it's really good if that's the kind of like headspace you're in. And the thing is too is like the whole line about like you're leading me on again, and it just, you can really feel that the dude's battling something.
Yeah. Well, the whole record, and I think it features all the things that make Seether great.
Right.
Instrumentation wise, vocally, lyrically, it's something that maybe it just didn't grab me as much back in the day. Like it's a song that even today I was listening to it a couple times too, and I'm like, it's a great tune.
Yeah.
But I'm like, just compared to
the rest of the
even
album.
Burrito and then the next song on the record, it's like it just, I think this could have been a 12-song record and it would have been fine.
Maybe it could have been a 13-song record.
Well, whatever. Listen. What?
Some say 13, some say 14.
Some say 13. Some say tomato, some say tomato. But honestly, it is a great song. It's just, again, when you're on a record with songs like Remedy and Truth and The Gift, like... it's a given that one song's gonna kind of be the.
We made that pun twice. That's enough.
That's enough. So the next track is actually another really big standout for me, and I think it's one of the most unique Seether songs they have. Period. Point blank. And that's Never Leave, which is the closest thing to a ballad that we could ever expect from Seether at the time. I love this song. I love the guitar track, that beautiful clean riff. Again, the lead parts from Pat Callahan, that massive fucking chorus, that cool little turnaround reprise in the bridge where Sean plays the riff a little differently. Like, just, it has so much going for it and it's such a unique, beautiful song. And I almost didn't expect it on the record, right? It's like it feels like a nice little break.
Hot take. This is my one that I could leave it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, this is You're
just saying you could leave it.
Yeah,
right.
I like Given more.
Okay, interesting.
And I think Never Leave, I think for me, I think it should have been on the Finding Beauty album. Tonally,
I can feel that. Okay.
It's a great song as a Seether song. I feel, especially like we were talking before about pacing. And how like you start the first like 8 minutes of this album and like you're hooked in and you're on that ride of like not necessarily aggressive emotion, but you're gonna be feeling things for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Never Leave for me is almost too much of a dip.
It's a bit of a sidestep.
Yeah, and it tonally I find that it's great, but it's just like, you know what? I really don't need this after what we just had.
Okay, I accept that.
And that's purely from I'm going down. I think that's where my ADHD kicks in. I was like, okay, I need something.
It's a little too much of a slowdown.
It's too much of a slowdown. The placement on it in the album is just a little off. And actually, that's something we'll talk about a little later. Is how I feel like the whole album itself is structured as one of the more downsides to the album, if there is any. There definitely should have been a little bit better track spacing because it is a lot of up and down. And I think this, for me at least, like this isn't where I wanted to be. For you, yeah, you energy wise, more of
a linear curve.
Yeah, I want to know what I'm going to be feeling, and like so, we already just did a huge spike down with Given and Never Leave. It just kind of like it, which honestly, and I'm only realizing this now as I'm talking to you about it. That could have been the point because the whole album is kind of making you feel, right? So you're starting off angry and you have that emotion and that energy, that rush of like your whole body's like, yeah. And then, you're slowing down a little bit and then you kind of feel like you're in that hole mentally and emotionally a little bit. And then you hit Never Leave after Given, which kind of helped push you there, especially after The Gift, which kind of made you go down even a little bit more into your head. Never Leave kind of makes you feel like you never leave that mental state almost. Like you're kind of in that sad, dark place, which, you know, mental health is stupid important. And obviously Sean's had his issues, but I really think that it's almost too much.
Right.
And I love the song, but I think it would have done so much better on maybe the next album, which is more about tonally about like loss and just it's more of a emotional album, whereas this one's more of an energy album, I find, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Like, it's definitely, and again, that's the beautiful part about music is everyone has different takes on stuff, and everyone has
like the lyrics are so great because it definitely sounds like he's thinking about giving up and things like that. Like, you've got like the line that's like, now that I find that I'm my weaker fate and I'm ashamed of lying, and all this, like, he beats himself up a lot in the track, and it definitely gets that feeling and thematic across, but it's almost like too much.
I hear you, especially going to the rest of the record, which is there's a lot of dark.
It's a ride
matter.
from here on out.
Man.
It's more of a thematic ride.
Yeah,
like this one we're in our head, and then from here on out we're going like targeted.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the next track, which is one for me that, you know, World Falls Away, structurally very cool song. Still being true to the record. Pat Callahan really shines on this one. John has some epic moments, but for me,
John runs this song.
Yes, I was about to say that.
Runs this song. World Falls Away is by far John's, like, this is his spotlight. This is what we were talking about earlier about, like, if John wants to take the spotlight and be able to showcase his talents,
he can.
The fills in this track, the parts where he literally is just bridging with his toms for a little while to let the other guys show off. You don't forget the drummer is there ever in the entire 4-minute ride. And it's perfect. And it's just
It's just you're just sitting there like, do it.
and the slow part where Sean breaks it down. We were talking about breakdowns earlier. I'm just like you.
Yeah.
Just not a fool. Na, 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 na.
Then it comes back in. That fucking cool solo part. Yeah, man.
I can't stop this feeling.
I like it. That's like
gray.
That's like the southern version of World Falls Away. And the world falls away.
It's like what every metal band has to have one song called Rise. Every grunge band needs a song about the world blowing up or some kind.
Oh my god, that's great. Yeah, no, you might.
That was yours.
Something.
You made that joke years ago.
Did I actually?
Yeah,
I don't know, okay.
and I've been using it for years ever since.
Okay, I'll take the. Well, everyone needs a rise.
Everyone needs a rise.
Everyone needs a rise,
and
bro.
everyone needs to let their world fall.
Everyone
away.
needs a bleed. Everyone needs a rise. That's
Yeah.
just how it goes. Yeah. But one thing that's cool about this record is there's, again, like we've mentioned, there's a lot of ups and downs, and man, going from World Falls Away, even going from Given to Never Leave to World Falls Away to the next track.
World Falls Away, before we go into the next track, would have been perfect after Given.
I agree with you. Yeah.
As just to talk about that whole structuring of the album thing, move this forward one, and I probably would have felt better about the placement of Never Leave. But go on.
Right. So I remember being really confused when I was looking at the track listing of this record, because there was one song that stood out to me that I couldn't figure out why this song was titled this. And obviously the second you hear the song, there's one line that really stands out. Well, the tongue inside my mouth is not for sale. And of course, I'm talking about the song Tongue. And man, I remember that first lyric, to me, it felt so awkward that I was like, I don't like, it was a song I did not relate to until way later in life.
Yeah.
Because it is a very raw and real song dealing with negative emotions and issues. And Sean has always been brutally honest as a songwriter, and Tongue is really a standout for me. You know, I don't want to be in this world anymore. If I can rise above this, I'll be saved.
I wonder if, especially because they use the lyric if I can rise above this. I wonder if that kind of helped him when he was reviewing his work, helped him eventually write, because Rise Above This by Seether is a later single of theirs.
Right.
And it's huge.
Yeah.
And I always found very good parallels between Tongue and Rise Above This.
Yeah.
And especially now when I like reading through the lyric sheets and everything like that, when I was doing my homework, it was interesting to me because half of it's almost rebellious. Tongue, the lyrics, you know, the tongue inside my mouth is not for sale. You're not going to make me do this, blah, 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 blah. But also half it's very like, you know, he's given up. He's like, you know, if I get back from this, I'll be saved. It's almost like a very conflicting emotional track. It almost feels like there's two different sides to this coin here that you're listening to. And Sean's clearly going through a journey of some kind of really trying to figure out what kind of person he wants to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, there's a lot of correlation between this song and Rise Above This with his brother as well.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know if maybe I'd be really curious to pick his brain on that one day. Like, just be like, hey, man.
He
like,
would definitely be one of those, hey, if you could sit down with anyone, have a beer and a dinner.
I would love.
Sean would be
I'd
up
never
there.
want to do a podcast with him because I know that's not his thing. But I would fucking love to buy him a beer and a burger and just sit down with him and shoot the shit for an hour. Like, that would be just... Because he's been a really important to me in my life with his lyric writing and stuff like that, as I know he has been for you too. Like, but songs, Tongue is something that is just, it's such an interesting song. It's definitely a standout for me on the record. Very moody, broody, you know, ending off him just repeating "Goodbye, Cruel World." Like, it's so, again, it's dark and it's deep.
defeative almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the placement of this on the record.
I do as well.
I think if you swap this with anything, it doesn't quite work. Going from World Falls Away into I'm the One, it just wouldn't make sense, because I'm the One, which is the next track on the record here, it is a interesting song because it's almost like a punk rock tune. It's very fast, 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Very dark subject matter, very to the point. You know exactly what the fuck this song's about the second he kicks into it.
Yeah.
This is a song that's about sexual abuse, and it's almost like he wrote it as a weapon pointed at the individual he was writing it about. And not to mention
it's one of the few ones that you're like, you listen to and you're like, oh, I really hope this isn't about me. And the one person that you know the song's about is like, oh,
I'm a giant piece of fucking shit.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only Seether songs that, like, right away, you know exactly what the song is about. It's very apparent.
There is about 3 or 4 different tracks on this album that within the first 15 seconds, you know what kind you're riding. And Because of Me does a great job of doing that for the album.
Yeah.
But I'm the One does the exact same thing with just
right away.
By the time you're done with
yeah. Very up tempo.
That's another one that John does a great job of, just kind of, he shines because his mix on this track is definitely a little bit higher. Like, his snare is a little louder and you can definitely hear the kick a lot more than the mixing of some of the other tracks. But like you said, like, as soon as you hear those couple of notes, he does that ride for like pretty much the majority of the track, and he's in that little loop, and your energy level doesn't dip at all because you don't know the guy, you don't know what this song's written about, but because of the way the music is written, you're at the same, oh yeah, fuck that guy, whoever this guy is, yeah, fuck him.
We're coming for you, motherfucker.
It is the equivalent of redneck chase music for grunge heads. Like that.
I like that. Okay. But then that fucking bridge too. That down, like, oh my god.
I want to get in a car. It's like that. Listen, me. We're gonna get in my car. We're gonna go. We're gonna beat somebody up. You can't ask any questions.
Yeah, we're gonna go fuck this guy up.
Yeah,
and that's the song that's playing as we're going to fuck this guy up.
Exactly.
This guy's a piece of shit who sexually abuses his child. So let's go fuck him up.
Sounds like a good Tuesday.
Yeah, sounds like a good day to do that. That's it. Now, I'm gonna kind of sit back on this next one because one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on for this is because of a Snapchat you sent me about this song.
God.
And Simplest Mistake is a shitty
whole
song.
song
is a
is
shitty
just-
song, and we're gonna no. All I have to say about it before I turn it over to my expert here is it is a very proggy song from Seether. It's something we'd see them explore a little more in different records, and it was so interesting, especially where it was placed on the record. Simplest Mistake for you. Walk me through just what you love about this song.
I will not hide any sort of shame and say that this, in my opinion, could have beaten Remedy by a mile.
Okay.
I will put this on the top of my fucking mountain.
This song fucks.
This song, like, first off, when you've been spending the last 3 minutes on just like a raged fueled drive of, I don't know where I'm going to go, but that guy over there, he getting some, and then this comes on after that, it sells it for you, because Simplest Mistake is all just a journey of like, watch it blow my mind. It's gonna blow your mind. Every time he starts a paragraph of these lyrics, it's a different part of, oh yeah, and this makes sense, and this is where I am, and it just takes too much to not kind of get locked in, and the way it literally feels like a basement jam gone perfect, and it just feels to me that Sean is clearly writing the lyrics from a place of giving up. Like, yeah, he's lost everything. He doesn't really care anymore. The enemy's coming in, the gates are closing. And you don't really feel that way, because musically the song has so much energy and so much passion about it that you kind of just want to go bust in ahead. And because you're still riding that high from I'm the One, that it's like, you can't really give up. It's like the epitome of a depressing song that's giving you too much of an energy high to actually feel that way. Like it is the complete emotional opposite of Never Leave for me, because Never Leave, I felt kind of got me into that headspace, and I was like locked in, and it was a little too much, and I couldn't really, it was just a little too, not necessarily slow, because it's not really a slow track, Never Leave, but it's just thematically just, okay, yeah, I'm here. Simplest Mistake is like, yeah, let's go over there. I want to do things, guns, explosions, woo. But the song itself is about literally giving up. It's, you fucked up. You've lost everything.
You've made the simplest mistake. Like, come on.
And then obviously the Snapchat that you're talking about was, I was on a road trip to see my parents, and the last minute and a half of Simplest Mistake is just an instrumental outro. It doesn't really change musically what you've already been listening to. It's the same kind of note structure and everything, but it literally is just like power and
down, like, fuck.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the heaviest fucking things I've ever written.
it is.
Has to be.
I said it in the snap saying that this is the epitome of what I think of rock outro for a song should sound like, and it still is. I still think that Simplest Mistake is by far one of the best outro songs. I think it should have been last on the album. If they didn't do Plastic Man and all the other stuff, placement wise, this could have been the last track on the album for me, and I would have been like, this was hell of a ride, and I am in it.
Interesting. Yeah, I could get behind that. I can get behind that. Simplest Mistake. Beautiful song. Also the longest song on the record. And very, very important song. Very important song. Very badass song as well. So the next song that we have on the record here is another huge standout for me, and that's Diseased. How often do we hear a guitar crescendo in that way? It is so unique in how it's written in the instrumentation wise. A very dark song, clearly about, well, I mean, I know from a fact because Sean has talked about it in live shows where it's a song about abuse from the standpoint of a woman going through an abusive relationship. And he has said in a concert in the past, he said, this song's dedicated to women who go through abuse. If you know someone going through it, help them out, that's just how Sean talks. He's very,
Yeah.
if you know something, you help him out, like that's just how Sean talks. But again, instrumentation wise, I mean, this has to be Seether again, almost at their best, like just putting everything together into that package. Plus, I think it's one of Sean's most brutal songs vocally in a good way. Like just, especially that bridge, like fuck him, just that vocal cord shredding scream that he does in the bridge is just like,
for me, it's the "Come sit close to me."
yeah, dun, 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 dun. Like just, it's so heavy and it's so dark, but then also it's a really powerful song as well, because he kind of looks at all angles when dealing with an abusive situation. Like,
And he's able to kind of show off all the angles too. Like when you look at the lyrics, like you kind of hearing a little bit from every side almost.
Yeah. And it's another one too for One Cold Night. It's a really big standout because it's one that I wouldn't have thought we would ever hear acoustically, because it just doesn't seem like a song that would translate. But it does. It's just as powerful acoustically. It definitely a big stand up. And going from that almost feels like another end of the record type song. But then we get into a song that there isn't a song on this record that affected me in the way that Plastic Man did. Especially the first time I heard it. I remember, again, vividly sitting with my headphones on, thinking that Disease was going to be the last. I don't know why I thought this. I was a dumb kid.
It's the same thing as for me though, is like, I could have checked out at World Falls Away and I would have been happy with the entirety of the album. Whereas for you, Diseased hits and you're like, okay, yeah. Like it's almost like you're emotionally and mentally burnt out at this point, because you've just been on ups and downs and highs and lows, and you've felt so many different things.
Yeah.
And then Plastic Man hits.
And I can remember having tears in my eyes listening to the song. Just, the acoustic, the vocalist with an acoustic guitar playing has always been something I've always related to. But lyrically speaking, I think it's one of the most powerful songs that Sean's ever wrote.
Yeah.
And at the time, I mean, I didn't know why this song affected me in such a way. As I have gotten older and I look at stuff again, even today, looking at it lyrically, like I'm like, okay, yeah, I know why this song hit me in that way. And, I'm not going to get into it, but like, I know that, I'm a Plastic Man, wish I could be the one you could be proud of. Like, I'm like, yeah, okay.
For an album that kind of gives you, you've got aggression songs, you've got sad songs, you've got a little bit in your feels, a little bit of everything. Plastic Man, as well, we can call it the end of the album.
Yeah.
It's almost hopeful in a way.
Yes.
It's definitely not an uplifting track in the sense that like you still kind of feel a little down on yourself when you're listening to it, but at the same time, the way the lyrics speak and like all of it is like, I'd be the guy that you could be proud of. Like I could be this, like when you hear the title, I'm the One, and the way that song is written about how it is, you could have called Plastic Man I'm the One, and the thematic would still fit, because the entire song is about like him as an individual and what he would want, like what he's trying to
feeling
get.
out of place. And,
yeah. And it definitely hits in a bit more of an emotional place, because it's one of the few songs on the album that you can clearly identify as strictly Sean speaking for Sean.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like when you're listening to it, especially as you and me were, which were young male teens, all of a sudden we're listening to it and we're thinking it's us.
Right. And even, ending off on kind of this really
melancholy,
dark,
almost
heavy record, but also lyrically, like, someday I know I'll find my place. Someday I'll sing my last refrain.
Yeah.
That's how he's ending the song off. That's how the record's ending off. So it's like, it still ends off on it's almost like a hopeful note.
Yeah.
Really. And it's it holds a very special place in my heart. It's a song I still sing to myself all the time. The first recording I ever did, quote unquote, of myself singing a song was Plastic Man.
I remember that.
That's how much this song meant to me and still means to me. And now, even as an adult,
Yeah.
you know, fucking 15 years.
Now,
or so
on your
later,
research
you know.
and your notes, did you ever find out any logic behind the 5 minutes of silence?
Nope.
So there's
Never.
a weird thing with this album, and that when you finish Plastic Man, it is technically the longest song on the album
Yes.
at like 8 minutes and something. But the track itself is only 3 something.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes.
But there's 5 minutes of pure silence, and I thought maybe it was in memory, or maybe it was just something they wanted people to. They wanted
Yeah,
people to
I
sit
never-
with the album almost, because back before like iPods, MP3s were really huge, and you could see that there was more runtime on the album. You just kind of had to sit there, and okay, has it stopped? Is it playing? Is it still playing? So if there was more on the album, sometimes people would just sit there and listen into the nothing.
yeah, and you'd be like,
Because sometimes they'd hide shit, which they did. But
And most of the time when bands hide a song, it's either like a really heavy song or it's a really emotional song. Seether, who knows very goddamn well, you just went through a fucking roller coaster.
yeah, it's a lot of
One
emotions.
day we're in the studio and it's like, oh, so what are we doing? And they went
Oh
ahead.
yeah, the jazzy one. Beep, beep,
Beep,
ba-doo-doo-doo.
beep, 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 beep. And so in English, the song is "Come Drink with Me," which doesn't need any explanation.
Yeah.
But "Kom Sang Met Mij" it's in their native language in South African. Like I can't.
I think it means "come with me."
Let's come drink with me.
Are you sure?
I'm 95% positive.
Let us know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments if you speak South African.
Yeah.
Or whatever I don't mean to.
Met me.
Kom sang met mij. Ons zingen in achterklaar.
Yeah.
I don't know the words, but
you could tell that they're just having a time recording
he's
that.
just having fun. And it's such a wonderful ending to the album. Now, if you go ahead and look this up on Spotify, obviously, unfortunately, this is not on there. And I missed it. I was like, we needed that little fun kind of little thing.
It's like
after
a send
it.
off almost.
Yeah. It's just like, hey guys, we know you've been through a journey, so here's a fun little
you've been with us
song.
for an hour now. So listen, you can check out. We're just gonna play some jams.
We're just hanging out in the studio.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. But that's it, man. That's cool. I'm glad we were able to sit down and do this. Now, something you said earlier you wanted to do was give our top 3.
I'll hit my top 3 real quick
Okay,
because
what do
I've
you-
already sold the ship, sold the store, told everyone anything. Obviously, number 1 for me is Simplest Mistake.
Right.
Like, so damn good. World Falls Away is number 2, and Because of Me is number 3. Because those 3 tracks, within the first 15 seconds, you know the ride that you're going on, and it's hell of a ride. I absolutely love Remedy. Remedy's probably one of my top songs of all time. But if we're talking about this album as a whole, how it's played out when you're listening to start to finish, what are the 3 high points in the album for me? The very beginning, the dead center, and that one send-off track that I think should have been the end of the album, but they didn't do it that way.
But what do I know?
But what do I know? I'm just some kid in the basement recording a podcast.
What the fuck do I know?
But yeah, those are definitely my top 3 by far. What about you?
So for me, my number 3 is tricky because there's 3 songs that could easily be number 3 depending on the day. But today, officially, I'm going to say number 3 for me is Diseased. Number 2 is The Gift. And number 1 is Plastic Man. Obviously, that's,
And those are, when you look at it, those are 6 choices that all stand out for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
And they're all emotionally and mentally 3 different reasons. Musically, they don't sound the same at all. And it's just a great showmanship of the album as a whole, because you're getting so many different emotional high notes, musical high notes. You're getting solos, you're getting feels, you're getting rhythm sections that lock you in. You got great drumming, great guitar work. It's just, if you want to put it on a good alt rock album, you can't go wrong with Carmen Effect.
I mean, it's definitely, I think for me, there's a reason why looking at the albums that made me a thing, and you know, it's one of those records that it still stands up for me. It's just as good. Listening through it today, it felt just as good as the first time I heard it, and it's a record that we've grown up with, and I've grown up with, and it's a record that, looking back, much like for those of you who have listened to the last edition of the albums that made me, I did Awake by Godsmack, and
Great fucking album.
That was a record that I have grown up with, and those songs mean something different to me today than they did back when I first heard it. And Carmen Effect really has that. Like Plastic Man, for me, like just using that as an example, like it meant something to me when I was a kid, but now as an adult, grown man, so much it's more. Like it means so much more to me, and just relating to the lyrical content more while still being able to just fucking headbang to Because of Me and Burrito and Simplest Mistake, and like just it's such a powerful fucking record, man, and it's such an important record. And Seether has, don't get me wrong, I could have easily picked Finding Beauty in Negative Spaces to be on this. I could have easily even picked One Cold Night to be on this because of how important that
and we didn't really touch on. We've referenced it a bit, but One Cold Night is one of the earlier albums that they put out as like a side B of a performance they did in the States, and they recorded the live performance as a DVD, but then they put out the CD as well. And it's basically acoustic versions of a lot of their earlier bigger hits. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure it's half Carmen Effect, half
there's
Disclaimer,
a few, they
and a
mix
few
it
hidden
in,
ones.
There's they mix it in, but there's definitely like they have Remedies on there,
which
Disease,
we did, as a quick
Truth.
little tidbit, fun fact before we go. The alternate version of The Truth, that intro that they do on the acoustic guitar before they go into The Truth, is brilliant. The song sounds completely different acoustically, but it's just as good.
Same with Fight Again. That's another one where they kind of change it up a little bit. And on a personal note, Sean's performance of Plastic Man is
if you like acoustic rock
good.
And the Seether Carmen Effect is a little too heavy for you, try the One Cold Night alternatives, because they are just as powerful emotionally and just as good.
And the amount of how much you and I watched that fucking DVD.
Oh, it was on permanently.
We never shut that shit off.
I still play it all the time.
Yeah. I love it, man. One Cold Night, again, and it's kind of in this era, so it mixes in with Carmen Effect real nice. It's so important, and I'm glad that you were able to join me for this and shoot the shit.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
No, man, it's been great, because I know that, again, from the standpoint of our friendship from the last fucking 27 years or whatever the hell, I would say Carmen Effect is Carmen Effect / One Cold Night / Godsmack stuff, which we'll talk about another day. You know, it's so important to us, you know, in our friendship. And I think Carmen Effect was really that first record that we really bonded over. Really.
It really brought the two of us together. Like little Garrett was just still trying to figure out who he was as an individual and figure shit out. You know, having his best friend being into the same kind of music as he was, it definitely helped that the two of us could share this.
Fuck yeah, man.
Fuck
and
yeah.
it's such an important record.
Emotions.
Fucking emotional damage.
Did you cry at the end? No. Are you crying? No.
Did you also cry listening to Plastic Man? No, bro, that's lame. We're on MSN going back and forth. No, man.
Did you change your status to that's the one? No. Why? No reason.
No reason. Do you also have the lyrics for Disease in your thing? Because, you know, it's cool if you do, but like, I just want to know.
I need to know, dude. Like, you've left Plastic Man as the what I'm listening to for like 6 months now. You know you can hit next, right? No.
Like,
TJ is just listening to Plastic Man.
So, fun fact before we go here. So, you remember Windows Media Player, how I used to have the counter?
Yeah.
So, my top rated track every year for 4 years was Plastic Man by a large amount. We're talking thousands.
That I really wish I still had my the original blue computer.
Same,
because I would love to see the numbers on some of mine. Guarantee you, Simplest Mistake is probably up there on that counter list.
Oh, I'm sure you got a few thousand listens on that.
Easily. But I think just as me growing up, I think it was Billy Talent's Red Flag was like one of the first songs that I ever like downloaded. And my sister would have been running those numbers up just as much because we shared the computer and everything like that. And Carmen Effect not only was a huge impact on who we were as kids, but, you know, my little sister basically grew up on all the music that I grew up on.
Yes.
Didn't really get a choice in that matter. Like, you're listening to this. TJ's coming over.
We're
We're
listening
hanging
to
in the
the
basement.
One Cold Night on repeat. And I remember, before you finish your thought, I remember there was a friend of hers who came over and we were sitting and watching One Cold Night. And they came and sat with us and they were watching it. And she says, well, like, they're not doing anything. I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, this is really lame. They're just like sitting there playing their guitars. Like, why aren't they like dancing and shit? And I just thought that was the funniest fucking thing because I had to explain to her, like, no, like this is what real musicians do. Like, they're not able to, with all due respect to, you know, the pop artists out there who are actually very talented. It's like Sean Morgan can't dance around and shake his ass because he has to play guitar and sing.
And you got to remember when the singing about the stuff that they are, there's a lot of emotions and feelings, and sometimes your brain can't go 82 different directions at the same time. Yep. But we've been rambling about this album for a little bit too long now. If anyone wants to hear more of our thoughts,
if you want to hear more about that, you can go ahead and follow us. What was the joke we made earlier about the podcast we were going to do? What was
I don't know, like, comment, subscribe, scratch my ass. What are you?
Scratch my ass with Garrett Coles coming soon to the Harder Show Network. Yeah, I'm Garrett Coles. We're going to scratch my ass. Today we're going to. Oh shit! All right, brother. It's good to see you, man. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been
Please
fun.
don't call me ever again. See you, buddy. It's been great.
All right, folks. There you have it. Another edition of the albums that made me, featuring my boy, Mr. Garrett Coles, talking all about Seether's Karma and Effect. You a fan of that record? Let me know. Would love to hear from you guys about that. Or if you have an album that maybe you would like to come on the show and talk about, let me know, because I would love to have a chat with you guys about that. As I think anybody, really, not just musicians or longtime friends of mine, could come on this segment of the show and really have a lot of fun with it. So I would love to have you guys on to talk about that maybe. If you're listening, hit me up, let me know. You can, of course, find The Harder Show anywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, CastBox, literally every podcast app out there, including Audible even, Amazon Music, everything. If you have a podcast app and you don't see The Harder Show on there, hit your boy up and let me know, and I will make sure that my podcast is on there. We also, of course, have the social media. We are at The Harder Show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's The Harder Show, HODDER, just like the spelling of the show. Hit me up and let me know. Would love to hear from you guys about anything at all. If you would like to get in contact another way, whether or not you want to be on the show or you have something you would like to discuss with me, hit me up anytime at the Gmail, thehardershow@gmail.com. And if you would like to support this show, you can do so by subscribing, leaving a 5-star rating. 5-star ratings help this show grow and climb up the charts. And let me tell you, as much as I love to do this just for fun and stuff like that, climbing the charts and things of that nature really, really helps. So if you would like to, help the show grow, consider subscribing and leaving a rating. Share with your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to help this podcast grow. And if you would like to maybe support a little more, you think, man, this Harder guy, he just seems like a freaking gem. I want to support this guy more. You can do so by checking out the Patreon. That's right, The Harder Show Patreon, patreon.com/The Harder Show. Become a hothead today. We have 3 different tiers that you can choose from, the $1, $5, or $10, all of which get special privileges, which include, at the $1 or more, a personalized shout out on every single episode of the show and some behind the scenes content. Anything above the $5 or more gets access to the exclusive monthly podcast, which is a horror narration podcast called The Tapes of Trepidation, which I am actually going to be working on the episode as soon as I am done editing this podcast. So I'm very excited about that. And if you join at the $10 or more a month, you will get a discount on merch, which once I hit my $100 a month goal, which I am not super far away from, I'm about $30 a month away from that right now. So Who knows? You might be one of the people who are responsible for me hitting that $100 a month goal. Once I hit that goal, I'll be doing something for the old Mercherino. Who knows? Maybe you'll get something for free if you join the Patreon. Who knows? Maybe. Something to consider. But whatever level you choose gets you a personalized little shout out, just like I'm going to do right now for all of my hotheads, which are just the best people in the freaking world. We, of course, have my man, Mr. Scotty D. Scott, thank you so very much for being a patron since 2019 and being a longtime friend of mine. You know how much I love you, buddy. I owe you a big old bear hug and a cup of coffee. And I will be hoping to see you soon, buddy. A humongous shout, of course, to the Grey Rooms podcast, who are an executive level hothead, the $10 or more a month level. What can I say about the Grey Rooms podcast that I haven't already before on this podcast? It's my favorite podcast out there. They just had their season finale, and oh my God, I am so excited for season 5. I just want to time travel to the launch of season 5 because I'm so freaking excited. And the entire team over there at the Grey Rooms are just amazing, wonderful, talented people. So thank you guys so much for your support of my podcast. Since the beginning of this year, at actually over $10 a month, just for the record. They don't pay $10. They actually pay more than that. So thank you guys very much for that. It means the absolute world to me. We, of course, have Mr. Ronan Komori, or Mo, if you are in the Hotter Show Discord. That's who Ronan is. We call him Mo. He is a executive level hothead. Ronan, thank you so very much for your support. Ronan's going to be coming on at some point to talk some music with me, and I'm very much looking forward to that. He is a very talented individual with, his voice acting and things of that nature. So very much looking forward to that conversation. We, of course, have Mr. Wolf Delta Pi, who is another very talented voice actor and podcaster. And he is a executive level hothead. Thank you so very much, my man, for your support. You know how much I appreciate you. We have Mr. Eric Phones, who is a executive level hothead. Eric, thank you so very much for your support, brother. You know how much I appreciate you. You can also find Wolf and Eric both hanging out in the Hotter Show Discord as well. And Eric likes to share some bangers in the jam space, so be sure to check that out. Eric, thank you for your support. And last but not least, rounding out my 6 patrons here, we have, at the associate level hothead, Mr. Arthur Unk, who, of course, is the head writer of the Grey Rooms and just an overall wonderful person. Buddy, you know how much I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast and for being such a wonderful individual and a creative sumbitch, because that season finale just blew my freaking mind. And if you would like a little shout out like that at the end of every single episode of The Hotter Show, consider joining the Patreon, patreon.com/The Hotter Show, for as little as $1 a month, or like $1.50 Canadian, I think, something of that nature, depending on how the dollar is. Of course, things are a little crazy right now with the dollar and inflation and that kind of fun stuff. We're not going to get into that. But these people give me some of their hard-earned money every month to support my dream, and I cannot thank them enough from the bottom of my heart. And if you would consider joining that so I can hit my goal of $100 a month, that would be absolutely incredible. But if not, subscribe, leave a rating, tell your friends. It helps very, very much. And with that, I'm going to sign off here today. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on The Hotter Show. Take it easy, guys.